Good morning, everyone. Onan here. Hope you can hear me okay. I'm using a little different audio setup here today. So I'm live streaming on a Saturday morning. Um, you'll have to let me know if this is a decent time for people. I have a hard time finding the right time to live stream or record, but live stream. I think for most people, if I'm on around 5 o'clock p.m. Central Time, it's the easiest time to be available for people to come in and enter the chat. But for me and my schedule, early mornings tend to work the best. Just with our family dynamics, it's a Saturday morning here. It's all quiet. One of our kids was down a little bit ago, but I think he went back up to bed. And so I might try doing some of these live streams in early mornings, maybe as early as like 6 a.m. Um, if a handful of people show up and want to show up, I'll definitely do them. If it's just me, maybe I will, maybe I won't. But one of the reasons I live stream as opposed to just recording is it gets me past the need to feeling that I have to edit things and do all that stuff. Although I've never really been much of an editor, I just kind of grip it and rip it. But live streaming just takes editing out of the equation, basically. So anyway, I hope everyone had a good holiday. We had a really nice holiday with our family. Had all the kids home except our oldest, who's decided to stay out in California, and had a really nice time. Um, did the whole midnight mass thing. Presents was, kids were happy with their presents, and we managed to avoid getting sick. There was a lot of sickness going around our um, school and church and circle of people over the holiday season, and somehow we managed to avoid that. I'm not sure how, but we're through the new year now. January is going to be really hectic for me. I've got a bunch of business travel, um, and I may actually use that as an opportunity to live stream from the hotel and stuff like that. But anyway, enough of that rambling. Wanted to talk to you about something that has sort of been formulating in my head over time, and something I think is really important to put out there for consideration. So we've been married for 22 years now, 9 kids. We had our first we had our first child about 10 months after we were married, so you can do the math. Um, and our youngest is 2.5, and we think we're done. That's that's the plan for now, at least. Plans can change, and sometimes plans don't go according to plan. So, but plan is that we're probably done, and so we've been um, actively using NFP for a year now, successfully for once to avoid getting pregnant. So we'll see how long we have to go through this and till menopause eventually either comes to the rescue or destroys things. But um, you know, we've never used contraception. We've never had to use NFP for any extended periods of time, primarily because my wife has always nursed on demand, and that has more or less kept cycles at bay for more or less as much time as we needed or wanted before we were ready to start thinking about another one. Usually, what would happen though is we would just kind of gently let off the brakes a little bit in anticipation of maybe adding another one in the, say, next few months, and then we would just get pregnant right away. um, but basically, there's been two stages, two different types of scenarios in our marriage. One is where we have, let's say, extended infertility because of, let's say, we're pregnant postpartum, and usually for us, postpartum infertility is about a year. Sometimes it's been a little less. Sometimes it's been a year and a half, but basically a year to year and a half plus 9 months of pregnancy have been infertile for us, so we haven't had to really worry about that. And then of course the other times is when we were trying to um, avoid getting pregnant, and we were fertile, and so we were using NFP. So we were either using NFP or not using NFP because we weren't really fertile at that time. So those are the two, I guess, most common. I mean, those are the two different scenarios you can basically be in during your fertile years. And within those, I've kind of identified two different ways I've approached each of those phases, and I want to talk to you a little bit about my approach to those, and what it's kind of done for our marriage. Now, before I talk about that, let me be clear here. This is not, don't take any moral advice or instruction from me, and feel free to leave your comments about the morality of how I've approached these things, whatever. But I'm just going to be transparent about how I've handled things during these different phases, and what I've observed in terms of how it has impacted me and my marriage and our family life. So, um, and I should say, what I should do is this: there is actually a fifth um, approach that I don't know if I'll talk about at the beginning or talk about at the end. Maybe that'll be a bonus phase, phase five. But let's just kind of go through no particular order. But so one phase is when we've been using NFP, and for us that is generally meant about 10 to 14 days of fertility based abstinence in the middle of the cycle. And there have so during this particular approach to that season, I've uh, tried to do everything possible to avoid any solo. And typically, when I'm in that phase, I will go through stretches. Let's say I go to confession, and then I can, let's say, um, make it a cycle or two, maybe. And then usually there's a slip up, or I'm just white knuckling it and then slipping up, and it's um, in that constant struggle of trying to survive that 10 to 14 days off. That personally, and maybe I'm just a weak man, but I've always found this phase and this approach to be extremely difficult, um, and morally challenging. Trying to deal with the guilt, going to confession, talking to priest, having some priests tell you don't worry about it, so other priests tell you your soul's in jeopardy, and sort of this constant back and forth um, with your um, conscience about what to do in that situation, whether to avoid communion or not, all that kind of stuff. And so that I've certainly been in that season quite a bit in my marriage, and it was, to be honest, pretty brutal. And what has led me to one of the things that led me to do this podcast is just years and years and years of frustration with that. Um, the let's say let's do the other approach to that season when we've been using NFP, and there's been periods in our marriage when during that season I stopped worrying about solo and just incorporated it in to my life. Typically, I would say during this season, it would be, you know, during the abstinence periods. Maybe it's every other day. Maybe it might be a couple days in a row, then it's a couple days off, and then it's but uh, during when I've approached it this way, my attitude has been I'm not going to obsess over it. And when I'm in that situation where the tension is high and I just need some relief, I just do it and then I move on without feeling guilty about it, without feeling the need to confess it or abstain from communion. And for better or for worse, when I've taken that approach during that season, it's been um, a mostly positive time, probably the most positive time in our marriage when we've been in that season. Now, there's always that lingering wonder and guilt in the back of your mind. Am I just deluding myself? I don't know. Um, all I know is that when I've been in that season and taken that approach, it has it has taken away 90% of the difficulty and angst and frustration individually and in our marriage during the abstinence periods, and made NFP not easy, but manageable when that's sort of the approach that I've taken. So that's sort of the second one is while using NFP, I just and I should add, when we've been in that phase, when I've been in that stage, we've also intermittently used other acts, mostly during ovulation. Um, my wife gets a lot of benefit out of that, but it's tends to be infrequent when we've been in that phase. But my wife has benefited. To my knowledge, my wife doesn't ever do any solo. I don't think she ever has, and probably never will. Um, but that's kind of how we've. That's sort of what that phase has looked like, and it's been. If we've had to use NFP, it has been far more harmonious and peaceful, I guess, than the white knuckle approach that we've taken as well. So those are the two, I guess, approaches that I've had when we've been in a phase of using NFP. So here's the so what when we haven't had to use NFP, when we've had extended infertility, either for pregnancy or postpartum, there's basically been um, two seasons or two approaches we've had um, during that. The majority being the former, the first one I'll talk about. And the first one is when when we've been in that season and other than right at the very beginning, we've always had a lot of kids, always had a small baby or my wife's pregnant or whatever. And for better or for worse, we managed to kind of be intimate every 7 to 10 days, something never more frequent than that. And generally around that 7 to 8 days. Um, and personally, I always found that not frequent enough. Um, maybe now in my older years, I could probably do that more easily. But for me, that 4 to 5 days is kind of where things go from manageable to very difficult. And so when we've been in that phase of extended infertility and we were on a timeline of every 7 to 10 days, I was trying to, again, kind of white knuckle it, mostly unsuccessful. Um, to avoid any solo, we weren't trying any other acts during that time. And it was better, I guess, in some respects than the times that we were using NFP because it was happening more frequently, but overall, the white knuckle frustration and roller coaster of moral guilt in and out of confession, in and out of the communion line, um, I found to be just very difficult. And again, one of the things that led me to start the UCM podcast. Um, and then I guess the other season, so the fourth season during that extended infertility period, um, my wife and I made a commitment to being intimate every 4 days, and with very little exception, managed to stay on that timeline every 4 days. We just knew that's what we were going to do, and it was an amazing time. Unfortunately, it wasn't a long time. Probably 4 to 5 months before fertility came back, and we had to go on the NFP wagon again. But we had a 4 to 5 month period where we were able to be intimate pretty much every 4 days, and our marriage grew a lot during that time, and I had no issues, not even really any close calls with solo. It was basically a non-factor when we were able to be on that timeline, and things were really good when we were in that phase. That being the fourth phase, and the difference, it's this. Maybe this is just me, but for me, the difference between every 4 days and every 7 to 10 days is like day and night difference in terms of what the experience is like. For my wife, it's not really that much different, but even she acknowledged the very positive impacts that more frequent timeline had, because I wasn't just always at the very end of my rope by the time, our night rolled around. It just I honestly didn't have to think about it anymore. I didn't have to think about trying to white knuckle it and up, because I just never really got to that point. So if you're in that period of, extended infertility, um, or whatever, for me at least, for us, if you can be active every 4 days, um, that I mean, more often is even better, but 4 days kind of builds in enough um, uh, absence, and you know y- the anticipation or whatever. Like, it's to me, it's just that um perfect blend of, well, we've been abstaining for a little while, but not always constantly to the end of our rope, at least to the end of my rope. And so that was a really, really positive, um, if not brief, phase of our marriage. So that's number four. So what's number five? So let's say the bonus phase, if you will, is total abstinence. That is something that I did, or I tried a couple, well, last month, and it seemed like an eternity, but it really wasn't that long. It was 20 some days of no sex, no solo, no other acts, no nothing. And I kind of chronicled that. I tweeted about what that total abstinence, so-called celibacy challenge was like, and it was, um, you know, it it was a mixture of positive and negatives. More positives than I thought. It wasn't as difficult as I thought it would be. Um, I never really came close to, well, I was very committed to try and do it. I was planning to do it for about 40, well, 60 days, 2 cycles. And I had, been very public about it, and I wanted to, be able to say that I did it. I didn't want to come to everyone and say I failed. Um, if I hadn't had sort of that public commitment to it, I'm not sure I would have made it, but it was, um, without a doubt, the longest period I've gone in our marriage without anything at all. No solo, no intimacy, no nothing. And it can be done. Um, Now, I haven't tested it on longer periods of time, but in the short term anyway, it could be done. And I would say, without a doubt, is easier than NFP without any solo or other acts during the fertile times. Um, I I have amazing respect for people, especially men, who can use NFP on an extended basis and go, be sort of the flip the switch on and off, be and have 10 to 14 days of abstinence with complete um, abstinence in between, no solo, no other acts. Um, I have I have amazing respect for guys, especially that can do that consistently. I have not figured out how to do that. Um, I'm probably closer to being able to do that now that I'm older and I'm closer to 50 than I am to 40. But I don't I don't know that I could do that on a consistent basis. And um, so I guess then the question is, are you going to, if you're in that period where you're not, where you are fertile and you need to avoid getting pregnant, you're going to have, I guess, three options available to you. One is just to be totally abstinent. I think you can do that. I think you sacrifice a lot of positive benefits of intimacy in your marriage. For me, I had to call it off because I felt myself on the near the breaking point with my kids, and I was really close to losing it. Um, and I did not want to do something I was going to regret. So that's why I called it off. But that's one approach. You could take that total abstinence approach, and if your goal, if your primary goal is to not engage in any solo or other acts, um, that is an option, and that for me is the only option I would have if that is the objective. The the other two alternatives, of course, are one is to use NFP and use no solo, no other acts during the fertile times. Um, I have not figured out how to do that. I don't anticipate I'm going to ever figure out how to do that. But I'm always open to hearing other people how you do it. Um, but I'm just being perfectly honest. I haven't figured that one out. And then I guess the third approach is use NFP, and during those fertile times, you as an individual and as a couple use a combination of other acts. And maybe if you are committed to that, you could use other acts and never use any solo, probably, unless you're like out of town for a while. Or you just use solo um, on a um, as needed basis. Obviously, no porn or any of that stuff. But that's an option. That's a way to get through the NFP. Again, I'm making no statement about the morality of that and what someone's conscience ought to be and what you ought to do in terms of the communion line. If you do that, I'm just talking about it in terms of what it actually looks like, and it is, um, at least in my experience when I've been in that phase, has been far better for me and for my marriage. Perhaps not for the state of my soul, but at least for me and my marriage and my family, when that's the approach that I've taken. So those are the 4 to 5 different seasons that I've identified in our marriage, and I guess each has their pros and cons depending primarily on how you evaluate the morality of solo and other acts, and maybe you can judge those two things differently as well. But um, it's a it's a issue that continues to kind of occupy my thought and mind, and I know a lot of other people go through this as well. And it's been my experience that couples that use NFP um, for an extended period of time seem to eventually find themselves grappling with these different approaches. And I um, and in particular, couples that have really um, suffered greatly when they've attempted to take that approach of no solo, no other acts, anything like that. And maybe that's what we're required to do. But what I can say with great confidence that if that is what's expected of us, it is an enormous cross. We should in no way um, take for granted what couples go through to make that happen. And when slip ups do almost inevitably happen, to be merciful and understanding to those people, because this is all way more difficult than I ever thought it would be when we were doing our marriage prep and NFP classes and all the Christopher West literature out there. At least in my view, did not adequately prepare us for all of this, and so that's why we do the podcast. That's why I do these live streams where I try to be much more transparent about my own experiences and how I've approached things, and I'll continue to do so. But anyway, so I had some time this morning. I have to go finish dishes here, and I wanted to throw that out there. I see a few of you are listening to the live stream. I appreciate you hopping on. If anyone has any particular questions or comments, I'll hang out here for a few minutes, give you a chance to drop those in the comments section if you want. Otherwise, I'll wrap it up. Um, Joan and I will be recording later today um, for tomorrow's episode. Well, next week, actually, the next 2 weeks, I'll be gone when we normally record. So we may be doing some similar last minute recording. But hopefully, after a few weeks, we'll be back to a little more normal schedule. If you are interested in um, talking a little more in depth about any of this stuff, but you don't want to leave a comment on YouTube or Twitter, we do have a Discord community. We have a UCM Discord community that has been really an amazing place. Um, it's a small community, but we have just really a wonderful group of people there. We have a priest there that's regularly in there answering questions and things like that. So if you kind of looking for a place where you can talk anonymously, you can go in and create a sort of anonymous Discord name and talk a little more freely with other people, including a priest if you want. Um, Go ahead and send us an email, um, unchartedcatholicman at gmail.com. You can I'll get you a link to our Discord. If you're more interested in the Onan stuff and want to get in on that Discord, I have a separate Discord channel for this that I think at this point is just guys, and I don't intend to restrict it to guys, but it's been guys that have been interested in this, where we talk, I would say, more transparently and bluntly um, in the Onan Discord channel as opposed to the UCM. Um, so if you're interested in either of those Discord channels, either way, send me an email, unchartedcatholicman at gmail.com, and I'll we don't I tend not to just post the link, just to keep anyone from joining, but, um, if you're interested, I'll usually exchange a few emails with you, kinda get a sense for who you are and what you're after, and if you seem like you might be a fit for our Discord community, I pretty much let people in and encourage people to come in and listen and speak your mind, but, do so in a manner that is charity first and not judgment first, is, I guess, the approach that I try to take on this channel, on our channels and in the Discord communities, and I think it's been a refreshing place for a lot of people that have, I guess, up until finding our Discord community, have felt like they didn't have a place where they could really talk freely and not be just put in your place and threatened and condemned and all that kind of stuff, which maybe there's a time and place for that. But in the Discord community, we don't do that, and we try very hard to maintain that environment. And so, anyway, looks like I don't see any comments. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this up. Hope you guys could hear it okay. If you catch this after the fact, you have any questions or whatever, or if you'd like to get into the Discord, just let me know. Otherwise, I appreciate you guys listening. I hope you have a great weekend, and maybe I'll do this again next week sometime. So until next time, everyone, have a good one.